Hi, everyone, and welcome to our almost weekly Q&A. We have Coach Alina with us. Welcome back.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for inviting me.
Anytime. How are you today?
Perfect. How about you?
I'm good. How's the weather in Slovakia?
It's pretty cold, quite annoying. So I don't go out that often, and the days are like dark, and yeah, it's winter. Like that's what we
Yeah.
can expect.
Do you get how's snow situation? Do you often get snow or just here and there?
In the mountain area, yes. Here in Bratislava, it's less. I mean, sometimes there is something, but usually it's somewhere in the mountains on north. And there is usually like people go skiing and basically on higher altitudes that's there already quite a lot of like things to do with snow and stuff.
Mm.
And you live in Oregon, like how is it, what is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
winter?
it's kind of typical Oregon weather here right now. And by the way, for everyone joining, feel free to post your questions in the comment section, and we'll get to them. I saw Matt has already asked a question, and we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, it's raining now. It's raining quite heavily, and we're in a valley where I live, and so
Mhm.
we get snow maybe once a year or once every other year for a day or two, a little bit like that. But we also have mountains nearby, and so now I know it's snowing in the mountains, which is nice because we got into skiing like a few years ago. So now I'm like excited because there's snow coming. So do you do any winter sports?
Not really. I mean, my husband does. I mean, like he used to like go skiing, and we are going in March or February, also like somewhere in Italy to ski there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not really good at that. So I've been there like a couple of times. So I am not a good skier.
All right. But anyways, it's a nice activity. And yeah, let's just jump in here and look at Matt. Matt is here with us and says, "Hi, this is my first speed bump. I feel like everything I do, even the information I learn here, is a sleep effort, which has been triggering my hyperarousal. Any advice? What should I do when I am hyperaroused?" I think is the kind of missing, the word got cut off here a little bit. But yeah, first speed bump, Matt's here. What are your thoughts when you hear this, Alina?
Yeah, I think it's very normal to feel that kind of like being lost in the situation when you are in the middle of a speed bump, because usually what happens is that as we enter that kind of like fear mode, which is fight or flight mode, it changes our perception. And that means that anything that maybe like made sense to us earlier stop making sense suddenly. So our brain just doesn't buy into the idea that, oh, you're safe or whatever, like just do nothing. The brain doesn't actually sees that. To the brain, it's a real threat, and it feels the urge to do something about it, and therefore it gets very difficult to kind of like find relief even in the information, let's say like watching videos or something that which previously could have brought like some relief. Now we use it as a way to escape sleeplessness, and of course it creates this pressure. So I think like the first step is just to see that pattern for what it is. So just see that this is something automatic, is a fight or flight response which we are not consciously choosing. So there's no kind of like there's no our fault in that. So that one thing. And now the second thing is just to see whether like where we apply pressure, in terms of like, okay, pressure to not feel hyper aroused, pressure to sleep, and so on and so on, and see how we can, through allowing and acceptance, remove that pressure. So for example, if we feel the pressure like, oh, I must do, or I don't know, I have to keep watching those videos or whatever, like that brought me relief, and then in reality you don't really feel like doing that, and then asking like, if not doing that would bring you actually the relief, and if the answer is yes, so maybe you can allow yourself to not do that. Or let's say the brain tells you, oh, you have to do the acceptance work, or you have to befriend wakefulness, because it can in itself can become a source of pressure, right? And when we realize that, okay, it is the idea that I must be befriending wakefulness, or I must having fun during wakefulness, is something that kind of brings me so much suffering. Can I let go of that idea? Can I allow myself to not enjoy my night? Can I allow myself to feel the anger? And oftentimes what happens is that the moment when we accept or let that emotion in and own it and give it right to be in our experience, what usually happens is that that emotion, once being heard, it kind of like, evaporates or kind of disappears on its own, because there is no longer resistance to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that was really, really well said. Very little to add. It was very nicely said. And you said something like you give it its right to be there, or something very nicely put. And the only thing I want to add is like, Matt said from the very, Matt immediately said like, "Hi, this is my first speed bump," and just from that sentence, you can tell so much that Matt not only has an understanding of what a speed bump is. For anyone who's new here, it's basically what usually is called like a relapse or a setback, something like we call it like a speed bump. And not only did Matt understand the concept of a speed bump, but was sort of anticipating it. Like, this is my first speed bump, almost anticipating that there will be more. So just hearing this, I think, you have a lot of insight, understanding, Matt, and, you'll do really well. And hope our reply here made sense to you. So, and thanks for being here. All right. So with that said, let's see here. Prod by AKC is here and sharing the following: struggling with insomnia and hypnic awareness. I watched a couple of your videos about these, and that the best thing to do is to let them be, accept them without intention. I'm struggling with accepting without intention. How do you truly accept these awareness insomnia without intention? I find it hard to accept them, as they can sometimes lead to sleepless nights. All right, very well. What do you think when you hear this, Alina? Do you want me to keep this for a second, or do you have an idea of
I
what?
don't know if you want to share, like you can share it right away. I'm just like,
Oh no, I was just saying like, for me, I kind of have to, maybe I should read it one more time. So
sure, yeah,
just to clear my mind. So struggling with insomnia and hypnic awareness. Yes, I watched a couple of videos. The best thing to do is to, without intention, kind of without effort, without trying to achieve anything. Yes. Now, but this is tricky. Probably says, I'm struggling with accepting without intention. How do I truly accept this without intention? I find it hard. Okay, as they can sometimes leave sleep. Very well. Very insightful question. What do you think when you hear this, Lena?
That's a good question, definitely, and it's very kind of like deep, on a deeper level, because I mean, I will try to explain how I see it, because for me, the concept of acceptance was also so difficult, and I misunderstood it many times on the journey. And if I have to say this, is that like acceptance is something, first of all, that has to be genuine. If we pretend that we accept, that's not a real acceptance. So in that case, I can also say that not accepting is better than pretending to accept. Because pretending to accept, it just adds another layer of that friction. Is like we are adding more pressure or another illusion, or like something that it is not true. Like, and then we feel very conflicted inside, because we feel like, oh, but I'm trying to stay positive, I'm trying to feel nice about wakefulness, and deep inside we know that is not true, but we are afraid to admit that, and that can take a lot of energy on its own. So sometimes I feel like actually in the beginning of the journey, like or even like throughout the whole journey, it's about recognizing that not accepting is normal. Like by our brain that is so obsessed with control, it's normal to try to kind of like cling into
use acceptance to achieve something like that.
Yes, and it uses like exactly, and it can turn even like the best practice into that kind of like sleep effort. So acceptance can become a sleep effort when we use it as a strategy to avoid sleeplessness, right? So I would say that sometimes even like complete honesty with ourselves, including accepting that we cannot accept, or saying that, okay, I don't like this. Sometimes that can already provide so much relief, because we are no longer kind of like fooling ourselves, and we are not trying to trick the brain into believing something that it obviously doesn't want to believe. So I would say this is like one of those paths, like the path of least resistance. We find where is like what brings us less resistance, what brings us less pressure, and we follow kind of that lead So basically, like sometimes it really was for me just realizing that after so long time trying to accept, and I realized like, no, I don't like it. I don't like this experience at all. But there was like kind of like a belief in me that was telling me, no, but you should like it. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to be okay. You're supposed to not care, right? And it would make me so angry inside. And it would, like it would just keep boiling inside until it completely like kind of bursts into, anger, frustration. And then after that, I would still like kind of like after that burst, I would finally feel some relief, but because I let those emotions out, because I was not kind of holding them inside without acknowledging them, I was kind of honest with myself in terms of like, okay, I'm trying to accept, I don't like this experience. I cannot accept right now. Acceptance is not available. And sometimes being that honest with yourself can provide that relief, or at least like remove the excessive pressure. And then we can see how like the rest of the path unfolds. And usually what it happens after is that once we are no longer feeling pressured, then we start seeing more opportunities, we start being more at peace, because nothing takes away our energy. And that's when like the miracle stuff starts happening, because then we realize like, I don't like it, and I don't care that I don't like it, it's okay for me, so, and then you reach the actual acceptance through realizing that you cannot accept. And it's so paradoxical for me. And but I realized that it's true, like the honesty is kind of like goes hand in hand with acceptance,
Yeah.
because you cannot accept without being honest with yourself.
Wow, that's so well said. Like two things that really struck me was when you said that it's probably even more helpful to be non-accepting than pretending to accept, because I can see that that's kind of another layer of confusion. And what you said in the last part here is almost like, if it's not available to be kind of accepting whatever happening in the moment, then we can accept our non-acceptance, like we can, something like that. Which, you see, this is a tricky but very interesting and helpful question. And the only thing I want to add to this is, like, as I had time to ponder here, was like, Prod B AKC said, I find it hard to accept them as they can. It's like, it's hard to accept without intention. And the question becomes, how can I accept without an intention? And it's almost like an impossible question, because if we try to answer that, it's almost like we're implying that we can, like, oh, there is a way to do this without this thought coming to our mind, which is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has that level of control. So it's almost becomes one of those questions where, like, we can see that it's almost like the problem, quote unquote problem, is in the question. It's an implied, like, we're implying that there is a way to do that, which nobody can control that. So this became very, very deep and kind of like, if anybody out there feels like that was hard for me to wrap my head around, totally understand that. Maybe watch this a second time, or just keep going. But I hope that made sense to Prod by AKC. And MC said, hello, I have currently not been able to sleep at all. I'm so nervous. And to this, I would just say, sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you're here, because I think there's so much content here that can be helpful. And just seeing that anyone who's nervous would have a hard time falling asleep, right? And then we don't sleep, then we become more nervous. It can be a loop like that. But hang in there. And I think there's a lot for you to learn here. And Leo is here and says, hello, guys. Can the person having insomnia be happy despite his insomnia? I never really heard this exact question before, but what do you say about that? What do you say, Alina?
I would say that in the beginning, when we are on the journey, I mean, I'm just trying to tell how my journey went, right? Like, I can only speak from my experience, but for a very big chunk of time, I was not really happy, because I was in the struggle. My number one priority was to get sleep, to never have sleep thoughts. So that kind of struggle, that desire to control, to get a certain outcome, led me to being unhappy. And paradoxically is that letting go of that desire to control actually led to happiness. And that the consequence of that was also the insomnia fell apart, because the only reason why we would hold on to the struggle is because like we still kind of try to control something that is beyond our control, and we keep judging ourselves for not being able to do that. But I would say like in on a smaller scale, let's say when we take like a day or something, there is definitely possible to find things that like are meaningful to us, and it's good to keep like kind of like shape our perception towards that as well, like not notice only like bad things, but also try to see how in spite of all the struggle you are still able to, let's say, do something or have like pleasant experiences, have a meaningful conversation with others, and so on and so on. So anything that you can find and acknowledge that is there, and that it's something that turned out to be not as bad as you thought, that could be already helpful. But I would say that definitely, like depending on what here is applied as being happy, for example, right? For me, being happy was that when I stopped problem solving my sleep, I realized like I don't have to do it, and then it kind of brought me this relief with accepting any outcome. And this is when it's kind of like the whole, like like all the pieces of puzzles, like they kind of came together. There was no longer insomnia, but there was no longer like suffering that was taking away the happiness in terms
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know
Nicely
that.
put. I would say, when I see this question and think of it like, followers, clients, students that I've had, I would say that it's very similar, that somebody who's in this kind of like intense state of fear, they really think like something is wrong. It's there. That person is probably not going to feel much happiness. But then when that person starts sort of understanding, learning, and the fear just comes down a little bit, then there can be these moments of like people often saying like, "Whoa, yesterday I felt good for like for half an hour. I didn't think about sleep and I felt quite happy." And if you will, that person still probably thinks of themselves as having insomnia. They're still in the struggle, but there are moments of happiness in that stage. So
But I also like I'm
yeah,
also
yeah.
recognizing here what it might lead like to person who is listening to that. What also can be kind of like often misunderstood is that okay, in order to be happy, I need to get rid of insomnia, because that's another kind of trap, right? Because then okay, but I want to be happy. So, and if you say that once you stopped struggling and then we became happy, and at the same time insomnia kind of got resolved, so therefore I cannot be happy until I fix this. And that is this kind of like catch 22, because then we keep trying to chase this insomnia like resolution, and at the same time hoping that it will make us happy. But I would say it's more like the journey of like it's so difficult to talk about it, but I'm gonna try. The journey to getting out of the insomnia paradox is not actually in making yourself or in learning how to sleep, or in learning how to never experience sleep disruption. It is actually learning to be okay with uncertainty, because what we normally, when we don't have insomnia, we often live in that illusion that things outside like are in our control. So basically when we look at everything, we feel like okay, there is certain level of control. I can do something and then people will like me. I will do something like that. So we live in that kind of like this
Illusion.
perception, yes, illusion, yeah, basically. And now when we face insomnia, it uncovers that that illusion is kind of like it is an illusion, something that we believed was true, that I can control things like what people think of me or what happens like externally and so on. Insomnia experience kind of proves that it's not true. We are not in control, and once we feel the lack, or we meet that lack of control, it makes us very lost and very worried. And therefore the journey is not about, again, like making sleep happen, because that's impossible to control, but it's about becoming okay with uncertainty, because that applies to any other like areas of lives. Because in reality we really have like very little fraction of control, if any. But that's the thing, like as long as we keep trying to control something that we don't cannot control, we might spend this time in being very unhappy. But once we realize that there is like no control, but I'm still okay in spite of not being in control, this is when kind of like the freedom happens, and then we feel kind of like happy, even though we know that we cannot control the outcome. And that's when like everything else kind of like comes together, like sleep returns, because there's no longer chasing for it. You feel, I don't know if it's any other areas of life, you feel more confident, because then you no longer chase certain things. You don't know, you just know that you are enough as you are, and you feel comfortable with that. So it's like, it's a very paradoxical thing, and I just wanted to add it because many people would feel like, oh, so I cannot be happy unless I solve insomnia, because that's not exactly like how at least how I think about that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you added that. Nicely said. Very okay. Well, let's keep going. We have and by the way, prodded by AKC gave us a thumbs up. That's very nice. All right. So Abdul, like I said, I have extreme paradoxical insomnia, and how I manage stimulus control. Should I go to bed and wake up at the same time? We suggest only go to bed when sleepy. I don't feel any sleep even after 2 days. All right. Well, glad you're here, Abdul. Thanks for asking. Sorry, of course, for the struggle. But I think this is, now this is a question where I think we can share some things that are not so philosophical, maybe, as we've been like in the very philosophical level before. But I can start actually here and share my thoughts. First of all, I think it's helpful when you realize, like, I have paradoxical insomnia, which is, to me, is just one way we experience insomnia. Actually, everybody who has insomnia to some degree has paradoxical insomnia, because when we sleep little, when we have struggle with sleep, we tend to underestimate, right? But seeing that, I actually sleep more than I think I do, just knowing that can be really helpful. Now the question becomes, like, how do I manage stimulus control? Should I go to bed and wake up at the same time, or only go to bed when I'm sleepy? I don't feel any sleep after 2 days. I think for me, starting towards the end there and saying that it can be really scary when we don't feel sleepy for a long period of time. But when we understand that when we're scared, when we're hyper aroused, that masks sleepiness. We naturally don't feel sleepy when we feel scared. That can be really helpful. And just seeing, like, I don't feel sleepy simply because I'm scared. And we can be scared for a long time. That can help. And then going to these kind of rules and stimulus control, etc. What I think about this is that any type of like hard rules like that are very tricky, in particular the stimulus control rules, because I don't think actually they make that much sense. The idea behind stimulus control is that, okay, insomnia happens when we start to associate the bed with with not sleeping, and we have to change that forcefully by making sure we aren't awake in our bed. We leave the bed and we only go to bed when we're sleepy, so that that actually just creates more pressure, because then we go to bed thinking, like, oh, this is it, now I have to sleep, so I can associate the bed with sleep. But of course we're so pressured that we don't sleep, and then we have to get out of bed again, and then we feel pressured because we have to wait until we feel sleepy, and then we don't know, are we sleepy enough? So I think just seeing that, honestly, to me, this is a lot about, like, seeing that the idea behind stimulus control is very, very tricky. And I think a more helpful way is actually just general education that we have on the channel, and learning more from this community. I think can be another way that can help maybe even more. So those are my immediate thoughts when I heard this. What do you think, Alina?
It totally made sense. I just want to add here is that anything that feels like punishment is probably not good for the journey, or not helpful. Because if you feel like, let's say, going to bed at the same time, if it feels like something you must do because there is this huge thing called insomnia and you have to solve it, and then it's probably going to eventually create that pressure, because that's the thing, like, we cannot control when we will fall asleep, and no one can tell when exactly they will fall asleep, and so on. So going at the same time during insomnia, when we have so much fear around that, can create this pressure to sleep, or pressure to be asleep at certain times. So that, therefore, I don't find this regular bedtime during insomnia helpful. If there's no fear around sleeplessness, you can go to bed whenever you want, even if at the same time, because there's no attachment, right, to the outcome. But when there is attachment, when there is fear of losing sleep, going to bed at the same time can create like pressure, because then we will feel like, let's say, if the window we set for ourselves starts at 10 p.m., right? And then on one night we feel not sleepy at that time and we don't want to go to bed, but then force ourselves to go there, then it again creates pressure. It feels like punishment. On the opposite, like when we feel sleepy slightly earlier, let's say at 9 p.m., but we know that, oh, I have to stay up and I need to kind of like fight through not to fall asleep so that I have better chances of sleeping 1 hour later, then it also feels like pressure. You're not like really kind to yourself. You're just doing it for the sake of controlling sleep, which is not possible. And now the question becomes like, okay, what feels less like a punishment, more like something that you would enjoy or find meaningful, or at least non-pressuring? And to me, the answer is that listening to the body. Whenever it feels like, okay, it's ready to go to bed, that's when is the best time. And going to bed also, like I find it helpful to keep in mind the intention of going to bed, because usually when our window starts, our intention goes like this, that, okay, I'm going to bed to sleep, which is again, like sleep is something like a performance goal, because we can either be asleep or be awake, right? So there's, roughly speaking, two
Outcomes.
conditions, yeah,
Dichotomy, yeah.
outcomes. So that means that if we are in bed and we are not asleep, that means that we already failed, because our primarily intention when we went to bed was to sleep, right? So shifting the narrative towards, okay, I feel like I'm ready, I'm going to rest, because rest is like, it doesn't have much measurement or whatever, like how we can estimate how much we rest. It's just like, it's just rest. It can look like sleep, it can look like just looking at the ceiling or watching something. It doesn't matter, right? So it's more flexible in that case. So I would say, yeah, like listening to the body when it is ready, and then also changing the perception of, or the narrative we tell ourselves when we go to bed. These
Yeah,
are like important points.
that's nice. Maybe two quick things. I just, for the exact reasons you mentioned, I often, in the beginning of like our program, we talk about this like timeless sleep window. We can, you can get up about the same time every morning, but then instead of having like a bedtime, you just like say, I'm just going to stop checking the time and do what I feel like. But you know what often happens, Alina, is that I have this question like, or somebody tells me like, oh, I was so sleepy yesterday, but my timeless sleep window hadn't begun yet. So I was waiting up for it, which is like, oh no, it became the same. As like, I'm
Yeah.
smiling because, for this reason, but of course I understand it too, 100% understandable, because we want to have control. So yeah. And for anyone who has in that situation, by the way, what I tell them is like, maybe just like stop, like give yourself even more flexibility, stop checking the time earlier, like the invitation, something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll uh, move on here. But Abdul, thanks for being here, and hope that made sense. And let's do one more here. One last one here. SJB says, I know I need to try and have a decent day, even if I get a little sleep, but my emotions are so much harder to control when running on less. This makes it challenging not to panic or be miserable. Advice. Thanks, SJB, for being here. And we actually sort of talked about this quite a bit in this episode, but I can start here and say, like, spinning off what you've said so many times, Alina, is this idea, I think, that when we think I need to have a good day, then already there's kind of like a little bit of pressure there. We feel like I should have, or I must, or I need to have a good day. Then we're pressured to have a good day. And then we probably won't have a good day, because again, anything that we apply pressure to is not that enjoyable. Coach Michael, who he always used to use this an example of eating ice cream, which he loved. And a lot of people love eating ice cream, but imagine having ice cream and somebody tells you, you have to eat that in 30 seconds. Suddenly it's not enjoyable whatsoever, right? Because of the pressure. So I would say, yes, if we happen to have a nice day after not sleeping much, it can be nice, because it can teach us that, oh, I can have a good day even if I didn't sleep. And that can take away the pressure from the idea that I have to sleep to have a nice day. True. But at the same time, if you don't feel like doing something, I think it's more helpful to just do whatever feels easiest for you. If you feel like I don't want to do anything enjoyable today, I just want to rest, I just want to take it easy, that's more helpful, because again, whatever is the kindest and gentlest way to you treat yourself, I think helps the most and takes away pressure. So that's kind of how I see this. But yeah, Alina, what do you think when you hear this?
I totally agree with you. And basically, it's exactly about this kind of pressure versus non-pressure. When we are pressured to have a great day or be productive, of course, we are going to feel even more guilty for not, how to say, being exactly as we expect. So we try to shape reality closer to the expectations, which is again like we don't have really control. And I said it earlier about this honesty and acceptance, that they go hand in hand. For us to be able to kind of like accept the journey, or just live in the or be with the experience that we have, we need to be also honest. And sometimes when we try to pressure ourselves to enjoy something while in reality we are deeply frustrated and very sad, that creates an additional layer of pressure, and that makes us even more anxious towards like closer the night. So
Yeah.
I would say actually uncovering those layers is the way out of this paradoxical situation, is actually being honest about like, okay, what do you really feel right now, and what does it make sense for you to do right now in this moment? Is it really pushing harder, or actually allowing yourself, or like cut yourself some slack and just allowing yourself some rest if you're really frustrated, if you're really tired? So that goes basically in line to what you said about
Yeah.
self-kindness, because this is like I what I usually like tell people when they also come with the same with a similar question about like spending like a day after like a tough night. It is like, okay, when we have tough nights, it is normal that we might experience some difficulty during the day, and in those cases extra kindness towards ourselves is something that can really make that tough day smoother, and make it, or at least like help us like that day a bit more than if we would without that kindness. So it's
Yeah.
like more like a butter, like just like difficult moments happen, speed bumps happen on the journey, and they're not pleasant. No speed bump feels great. I can tell that 100%. Every speed bumps is terrible. So, so that's why we don't have to try like trick our minds into believing, oh, I'm enjoying my speed bump. It's okay to not like it. It's okay to not like the day after. So, but by being and staying extra kind the next day, we can actually make that experience seem a bit smoother, so that we are no longer resisting it. And since we are no longer resisting it, then this experience will stop repeating itself, and that's
Yeah.
how it kind of like the paradox falls apart. So, and I think it starts with this kind of self-kindness and treating yourself nicely and being honest with yourself. If you feel frustrated, sometimes allowing yourself that frustration can actually be the thing that can take you out of that frustration.
Perfect. That's perfect and way to end today's Q&A. I want to thank everyone for being here, for supporting the channel, for asking your questions, and Alina, it was super nice catching up with you again, and look forward to
Thank
bringing you back
you.
soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.